Jericho and Kovar enter the arena. They stand at opposite ends of each other. The audience in the stands of the Colosseum are losing their minds, yelling, clapping, and even crying with joy. They all watch as Jericho begins tapping his wrist. A device is strapped to it. A form of technology many of them had never seen before. It glowed and showed holograms that Jericho seemed to understand. He tapped a few buttons, surveying functions on the armor that he was wearing. Kovar watched him fiddle with his gadgets and his suit of armor with a smirk. He raised his hand into the air. The crowd went silent for a moment. Jericho was surprised by the sudden silence and began looking at the crowd. They all began to chant a single word in unison. Kovar! 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 Every man, woman, and child was chanting for their pharaoh. Even the men that were locked in cages but allowed to watch this fight were chanting for Kovar. Jericho shakes his head at the crowd. This is disgusting, Jericho says as he stares at Kovar. The chanting is still going on because Kovar hasn't lowered his hand yet. You must have a weak constitution if this is disgusting to you, Kovar says, still smirking. Though I suppose a man in need of so much armor must have a weak body. I didn't make a career out of brutalizing others and enslaving them, so I guess I don't get to have a body like yours. Was the trade worth it? Your soul for an above-average body? Jericho says as he stares Kovar in the eyes. He drowns out the continued chanting of the crowd. I'll make you ask me that again before I kill you, Jericho Cogspire. For centuries have taught me the value of the naked truth before the light leaves our eyes. Kovar uses his other hand to pull out his longsword. It's a sword of a curved blade. You and your pretentious riddles. Guess I shouldn't expect modest poetry from an arrogant egomaniac of a caveman, Jericho says as he takes a breath. His power suit was fully functional. He had modified it with all the technological resources of the THA. The resources combined of his mind allowed him to make a suit unlike any other ever made in the world. A kinetic force field, a live analytic scope, thruster gauntlets and boots, wrist cannons loaded with enough mana to fire off 4 disintegration beams. Just one has been proved capable of one-shotting a frost giant. And if all else fails, he has something up his sleeve. The Iron Core. It must make you feel pathetic, having to wear so much gear to even come close to the power that I possess, especially when you're fighting for the woman that you stole from me, Kovar says as he moves his wrist, pointing his sword at Jericho from the distance. His stance was calm and calculated. He may not be a technical genius, but when it came to combat, he was a genius in his own right. He had already measured the distance between him and Jericho, 150 meters. He would fake him out by charging him head on, making him believe that he was arrogant enough to try a frontal assault. Within 30 meters, he would swing his sword into the sand, making a cloud of cover in front of Jericho. Another fake, as he figured his equipment wouldn't lose sight of him. Jericho will think that Kovar has made a mistake and aim for his blind spot. That is the moment that Kovar shall shove his sword into the weak spot of Jericho's armor. A weak spot that he had noticed within seconds of entering the arena. I didn't steal her from you, because she's not an object to be taken. And I'm not fighting you to make her love me. I'm fighting you so that I can finally end the nightmare of her life that is known as Kovar, Jericho says as he grits his teeth. Anger rises in him. The crowd is still chanting Kovar's name. How could these people cheer for a man like this? He didn't see them as people. He saw them as property. When do we start fighting? Jericho asked, tired of waiting. The moment the crowd goes silent, Kovar says, and then lowers his hand to his side. The crowd stops chanting in under a second as silence fills the arena now. Kovar suddenly charges straight towards Jericho. His speed was nearly untraceable. Most in the crowd had a hard time just keeping track of it. Jericho felt a lump in his throat as he triggered his helmet to appear over his head now. his face fully covered, his HUD, otherwise known as a heads-up display, pulled up.
Warning, target is accelerating. 96% likelihood he will go for a frontal assault.
Kovar continued his charge, keeping his grip on his sword. His left hand remained by his side as he raised his right hand, gripping the sword slightly. He was almost in range. 5 more feet and he'll throw up the sand as a decoy. 96% was nearly a guarantee. The other 4% is typically junk data or some kind of supernatural event taking place. Jericho had tested it in the training room against dozens of foes while using his analytical scope.
Jericho, please be careful. Kovar never does what you expect him to. He's unpredictable.
Lyra's words echo in his mind. Jericho begins to charge up his wrist cannon to fire a disintegration beam. If Kovar was going for a frontal assault, then Jericho could end this right now with a single shot. Kovar sweeps up the sand in front of Jericho and then shifts to the left. Jericho's eyes widen in shock, but his HUD gives him an update.
Thermal analysis. Blind spot detected. 100% likelihood of a kill shot.
Jericho smirks of joy as he aims his wrist cannon right at Kovar's blind spot. Seems like the caveman really did underestimate my tech. Jericho mutters to himself. There it is. Kovar whispers to himself as he sees a small blue light shining in Jericho's wrist cannon. He was taking the bait. He would shift his body into a hard left turn, moving beside Jericho's beam attack. Then he would shove his sword into the small opening at the back of Jericho's neck. It must be where the helmet disappears to when he shows his face. This battle was about to end with Jericho on his knees, gurgling blood into his helmet.
Jericho!
Lyra's voice yells in Jericho's mind again. Kovar was unpredictable. Lyra said that. He had to choose between trusting Lyra or trusting statistics and technology. He trusted Lyra more. He cancels the beam and tries to trigger his thruster boots to make some distance between him and Kovar. Kovar curses under his breath. Did he see my ploy? This boy may be more clever than I thought. He thinks as he catches his footing and shifts towards Jericho. No matter, I've still got him. Kovar suddenly throws his sword at Jericho. It happens so fast that he doesn't have time to react. The sword slams itself into his chest and misses his heart by 3 inches. Pain fills his body as he feels the sword stuck in his chest and its tip pressing against the back of his armor. Jericho stops moving as he looks down at the sword in shock. Kovar doesn't miss a step as he lunges forward and grabs the handle of the sword. He measured Jericho's body earlier. His heart should be 3 inches to the right. His muscles strain as he tries to curve the sword to cut Jericho's heart in half. Ask me the question again, Jericho. Kovar says with a smirk as he's about to kill Jericho. Jericho grunts in pain as he coughs up some blood, finally getting over the shock of what just happened. He triggers something in his suit. Okay. How does 10,000 kilowatts of kinetic energy feel, you prick? Jericho says as he suddenly triggers his kinetic force field. Jericho knew that the kinetic force field only had 10,000 kilowatts of energy inside of it. He planned to turn it on when needed to block Kovar's blows. He didn't foresee him unleashing the entire power storage on Kovar's body at once. This electric explosion caused immense damage within a 50-foot circular radius around them. Kovar felt more pain in that moment than he had in centuries through his life. His skin was burned off, and his heart stopped beating for a moment. The floor beneath Jericho and Kovar collapses as they both fall down into what appears to be an underground network of tunnels and caves. The audience had remained silent since the fight had started. Yet when the explosion went off, people got into a panic, and they began running away, stampeding to get out of the arena, desperate to leave. The best part about the kinetic force field was that Jericho's armor protected him from it. He took no damage from the explosion, and he used his thruster boots to propel himself up before hitting the ground. He hovered above some of the debris. He was still in the darkness of the tunnels, but could see the light outside the hole. I win, Jericho says with a smirk, but then coughs more blood. He realized he still has a sword in his chest that was planted there by Kovar. He rips it out. He gasps in pain from doing it, but the suit quickly cauterizes the wound. Jericho is certainly in pain and injured, but with no vital organs injured, Kovar definitely got the worst of the battle so far. Mother, why was I born a slave? A voice says in the dark.
Warning. Target had a 0% chance of surviving that explosion. That sound is likely another creature.
Jericho shakes his head and disables his analytical scope. He can't rely on it when it comes to Kovar. Jericho lands on the floor of this tunnel and turns on a flashlight. He sees Kovar pinned under a giant pipe. His body has severe burns and his arms have been flattened under the pressure. He was in no shape to fight. Tell your people to sound the victory horn. This battle is over, Jericho says as he stands in front of Kovar. Please stop. Hurt me. Not her. Stop. She can't take it. Kovar says weakly as his eyes are dulled out. It looks like the electricity fried his sight. I said to tell them to sound the horns, Kovar. Don't make me kill you, Jericho says as he aims his wrist cannon at Kovar. The world is so cruel. Why can't we choose the life we want before we are born? Why? Why must I watch myself become what I hate? Why was I born as a slave? Kovar says into the air. You were a slave? Jericho asks. He keeps his wrist cannon aimed at Kovar's head. One blast and this would be over, but Kovar's words make him freeze. How could this man have been born a slave when he rules the country of slavery? The THA knew that Kovar was unable to die of old age, but they had no idea that the Pharaoh had the ability to heal from nearly any wound. If even one particle of his head remains alive, then he can heal again. Neither the Promises of Pandora nor Jericho knew this. Kovar was healing moment by moment. His skin was already returning to normal on the lower half of his body. Jericho's flashlight was focused on Kovar's face, so he didn't notice yet. Kovar's mind was slowly escaping from his shock-induced delirium. My father was killed for failure to pay off his debts. The man who had killed him had secured my mother and I as his slaves. A practice that was illegal at the time, but it happened anyway. Nobody cared enough to stop a whore mother or her weak son from being enslaved. I lived as a slave. Were you a slave, Jericho? Is that why you hated so much? Kovar asked Jericho. Kovar was a master manipulator. He knew how to emotionally target someone. He could see Jericho's wrist shaking from pointing it at him. Jericho wasn't a killer, and Kovar could see that. Lyra deserves a man willing to kill for her, and Jericho simply isn't that. All Kovar needed now was time to heal. Jericho aims his weapon at Kovar's head. He knows that he should just fire his disintegration beam and end this. But Kovar's arms were destroyed. He wasn't a threat anymore. Not to him and not to Lyra. Killing him now, it wouldn't be about protecting Lyra. It would just be about murder. Did Kovar deserve to be murdered? He said he was a slave. So how did he get to this point? His question stirs up memories of Jericho's life. Jericho lowers his wrist with a sigh. No, I wasn't born a slave, but I might as well have been. I was born of legs and arms that didn't work, an entire village of warriors, and I was the only cripple living there. They had treated me like I was a burden. Every moment was one in which I was reminded of how worthless I was. Jericho says he thinks about Nedwin, the brother he needs to kill, the one who got his loved ones killed. Ah, so you felt the anger, the rage? Kovar asks. Yeah, I have, Jericho says with a frown. So I know that these people are living a life of agony, and it's because of you. Nobody in this world deserves to feel powerless. Nobody deserves to be forced to be something they don't want to be, Jericho says as he thinks about Lyra. You really love her, don't you? Kovar asks. His arms had regrown and his strength had returned. He could see his sword laying on the ground about 10 meters away from Jericho. Vora, the gladiator. Don't call her that, Jericho says of anger as he points his wrist cannon at Kovar again. You made her be that. That is not who she is, Jericho says with pure anger in his voice. Oh no, you're wrong. I didn't make her into anything, Jericho. That was always inside her. The part of her that was tired of being a victim, tired of always doing what's right, even if it made her suffer. She has a beast inside of her, and I know, because I found that beast inside myself the day that I watched my mother whipped to death for stealing an apple for me. And you know why, Jericho? Because I picked up a dagger and I killed every single man who would call me a slave. And after that, I took control of a place that never gave a damn about me. The world allowed me to be a slave, but I earned my freedom. And if they want to stop being my slaves, then they can earn their freedom just like me, Kovar says. Is Lyra a slave to you? Jericho says of anger. He begins to charge up his disintegration ray. This man had to die. She's a survivor, and so am I! Kovar yells as he suddenly shoves the pipe off his chest and kicks Jericho hard in the chest. Jericho falls onto his back in shock. Kovar runs over and grabs his sword. And that is why she'll be mine, Jericho. Because unlike you, we are strong, Kovar says and points his sword at Jericho. His wrist cannon was on a 10-second cooldown, and his kinetic force field was out of power. Jericho looked over Kovar's body and realized that he had been healing. A headshot was the only potential solution he had to this, but he would need to get a clear shot on Kovar's head. Most of Kovar's clothes were missing now. All that remained were his pants, and even that had holes in it. His body was muscular and intimidating as he faced Jericho. Jericho's armor was still in good condition, except for the hole in his chest plate. Kovar charged at Jericho now. Jericho kept his face hidden in the helmet as he charged up his thunder gauntlets. Kovar kept swinging his sword with the fluidity of a river, but the speed of a tornado. Jericho tried his best to block the connection of blade with his gauntlets, hoping to snap the blade off the hilt. However, Kovar could read Jericho's moves of ease. He kept chipping away at his armor, left and right. Kovar didn't want to risk slamming his blade into Jericho again, unsure if he could electrocute him again like last time. So instead, he kept swiping his blade, breaking off armor and causing slashes on Jericho's skin. At this rate, Jericho was going to die by 1,000 cuts. The longer that Jericho kept trying to dodge Kovar or block his sword attacks, the more Kovar's body healed and got back to perfect condition. 10 seconds had passed along with over 30% of Jericho's armor being chipped off and 20 slashes along his flesh. He had 3 disintegration rays left, but Kovar was too fast and close to pull off a shot. Kovar did a sweep swipe at Jericho's left leg, aiming for a part of the flesh that was exposed. Jericho yelled in pain as he felt a deep cut form on his leg. He fell to his knee. Kovar smirks as he prepares for the killing blow to slit his neck. Out of instinct, Jericho suddenly uppercuts Kovar with his right fist. The sound of thunder cracks as Kovar is lifted off the ground by a foot. Jericho doesn't let this opportunity go to waste. He screams through the pain and lifts himself up onto his feet despite the burning pain in his leg and begins a barrage of uppercut punches into Kovar's jaw and neck. Kovar gasps in pain and shock at how much damage these thunder gauntlets are causing. But even more than that, this move was familiar. It's something that he had taught Lyra himself. Jericho punches Kovar one more time in the stomach and manages to curve the trajectory of the punch to slam Kovar into the ground. Kovar feels at least 6 ribs broken and his jaw was completely shattered. He had to spit out several teeth. What's wrong? Got nothing to say anymore? You seemed so talkative before! Jericho yells as he keeps standing. With his fist raised up, Jericho was in a lot of pain. Kovar must have done severe damage to the tendon of his left leg. Tears formed in his eyes from the pain, but he kept standing. He knew he had to. This was for Lyra. Rage consumed Kovar. How was this weak man in armor doing so much damage to his body? That move, it was Lyra's. She taught it to him? The world was his slave by right of his power, but Lyra, she isn't a slave to Kovar. He loves her. She was the one person he ever met who, like him, earned her freedom. She didn't cry and mope about being a slave. She killed who she had to earn her freedom, just like him. She was his gladiator, and he was her pharaoh. He intended to give her the power to heal like him, to have her by his side for centuries, the two of them, ruling the world beneath their feet. Power was all that mattered, and the two of them would have it all. And this weak man that was standing in the way of that? He had to die. No matter how this story goes, Jericho is going to die. Kovar's body begins to glow with power. His jaw healed in mere seconds now. I can't believe you're making me resort to this. A curse mark revealed itself on Kovar's body. His whole body was now covered in it. Curse mark, stage 3. Kovar's body somehow became even more of a sculpture of perfection. His muscles gleamed with power. His speed and strength was now tripled. You have a curse mark? Jericho says in shock. I don't need this anymore, Kovar says and drops his sword on the ground. Jericho blinks and suddenly Kovar appears in front of him. He uppercuts him the same way that Jericho just did a moment ago. Only this time, Kovar makes Jericho launch into the air like a rocket. Ah! Jericho yells in pain as he feels a huge dent in his chest area of his armor. It was putting pressure on his lungs as he was still flying up above the hole in the arena from the punch. He pressed the button that made the chest piece fall off of him, relieving the pressure. His bloody and bruised stomach, abs, and muscular upper body was now on display along with the rest of his damaged armor and body. He tries to trigger the thruster boots to steady himself in the air. I'm not done, Kovar says as he suddenly jumps and in a moment is underneath Jericho, at least 30 feet up in the air right now, as he grabs Jericho's neck, gripping it tightly. Jericho gasps as he feels his neck being choked. The armor crumbles like paper from the strength of Kovar. Ask me the question again! Kovar yells as he chokes Jericho, trying to crush his neck. Why won't you let Lyra choose what she wants? Jericho yells in pain. He knew that Kovar loved Lyra in his own twisted way. He hoped those words would distract him long enough to charge up his wrist cannons. It was risky to fire off 2 shots at the same time, but it was life or death at this point. Kovar remained stunned long enough for Jericho to slam his wrist into Kovar's chest. He tried lifting them up towards his head, however the direction of the air made it too difficult for him to pull it off, and so instead he fired 2 disintegration rays into Kovar's chest. The sound of burning flesh filled the air as Kovar didn't even scream. His pain tolerance had also tripled with the curse mark. Both of his lungs were destroyed by the beams. Kovar couldn't breathe anymore, yet he still stared Jericho in the eyes through Jericho's helmet. I don't need air to end your fucking pity story, Kovar says with the last breath he has before he's now suffocating. He braces his right fist while holding Jericho's neck with his left hand. The two of them were now falling towards the ground from 30 feet up, with Jericho underneath Kovar. Jericho tries to trigger his thruster boots, but using 2 wrist cannons had short-circuited his suit, which he knew was a risk. Kovar punches Jericho in the face with everything he has. Jericho's helmet shatters into pieces, blown away by the wind. Some pieces of the armor slash across Jericho's face like glass, giving him a scar. If he didn't have his helmet on during that punch, Jericho would be dead right now. The two of them slam into the ground, Jericho on his back with Kovar standing over him now. Jericho feels nearly every bone in his body broken from that fall. Normally his armor could have cushioned the fall, but at this point over 80% of his armor had been destroyed by Kovar. Jericho looked at Kovar now, witnessing the 2 holes in his chest that had already begun to close up from healing. He was healing even faster than before. You're a monster, Jericho says as he looks at Kovar in pain. Kovar feels his lungs are back as he takes a deep breath and rips off the last remainder of armor that Jericho has. The battle was over. Now it was just about showing Lyra what happens when love alone isn't enough to win a fight. Monsters, heroes, villains, none of these terms mean anything. All that matters are the conquerors and the conquered, Kovar says as he grabs Jericho's neck and lifts him off the ground. Jericho yells in pain as he feels all the broken bones in his body move. It felt like glass was under his skin. You didn't have it in you to kill, Jericho. And Lyra is a woman unlike any either of us have ever met. She deserves a man willing to kill for her. She deserves a conqueror, Kovar says as he begins to crush Jericho's neck. He could snap it right now, but he wants it to be slow and painful. Ask me the question again, or I'll snap your neck right now, Kovar says as he lifts Jericho about 2 feet off the ground. His feet dangle. Was it worth it? Your soul for an above average body, Jericho says with a strained breath. He felt shame at doing what Kovar wanted, but he needed every second to think of a way out of this. I'm willing to give up anything for power, and I imagine you feel the same about now. You're in the way of Lyra's potential, and for that, you need to die, Jericho Cogspire. Kovar begins to twist Jericho's neck, and the sound of a bone cracking fills the air. Only it isn't the sound of Jericho's neck. That's funny. I can say the same thing to you. Jericho's hands grip Kovar's wrist with power as he slams his knee into Kovar's stomach. The impact makes Kovar fall onto the ground as Jericho lands on his feet, his chest glowing as Jericho uses his last resort. Smoke steams around his body as his bones and cuts all begin to go away. His body heals entirely as his iron core was triggered. For 1 minute, and 1 minute only, Jericho had the strength and healing on par with Kovar. The space stone that had fallen to the ground, the one that acted as a power source for Jericho to be able to move his limbs and arms, Jericho just triggered its core energy. This made his body be in perfect condition, constant cellular regeneration. These two shirtless and powerful men now faced each other, both with a look of determination on their faces, both with the strength and healing of the gods. The only difference between them is that when that 1 minute goes by, the iron core will turn off forever, and Jericho will be paralyzed again, unable to move his arms or legs again for the rest of his life. Or, even worse, he could die. He doesn't know for sure since he's never done this before. Another trick? What's next? Kovar yells in anger as he stares down Jericho. No more tricks, just fighting. No matter how this goes, you're my last fight, Kovar. Jericho brings his fist up. He feels his muscles strain as he flexes his fingers, getting used to the power flowing through him right now. Please forgive me, Lyra, Jericho mutters as he suddenly breaks the sound barrier. He moves at an insane speed, punching Kovar across the face hard with his right fist. The punch is so hard that Jericho breaks his hand. Every bone in Kovar's right half of his face is broken from the punch. He flies into the wall of the Colosseum, creating a hole in it as he lands on the ground. Kovar takes a deep breath of air in shock. How? Kovar yells in shock. Jericho reappears in front of him and grabs Kovar by his neck, lifting him off the ground. He slams him face first into the ground again, creating a crater. I think it's been too long since you felt powerless, Jericho says as he slams his boot into the back of Kovar. Kovar yells in pain as Jericho shatters his spine. Kovar gives off a blistering scream of pain from that. Jericho grabs Kovar by the neck and lifts him up and throws him into the ground again, but on his back. Kovar is paralyzed right now. It's been too long since you felt like a slave, because if you knew how it felt to be one, if you truly knew how it felt, Jericho raises his voice in pure anger. He thinks of Lyra, how hurt she was when he met her, how much she hated herself for her curse mark, how scared she was that she was going to kill him. He knows that a part of her still thinks that she deserved to be a slave for her weakness at the time. Fury fills his body. 50 seconds left. That you would never make anyone else experience it and act like they deserve it! Jericho yells as he punches Kovar in the stomach multiple times. Kovar spits out blood. He keeps punching him repeatedly. Complete power filling the air as the pharaoh of this country whimpers in pain. Nearly every bone in Kovar's body is broken. Jericho keeps punching him again and again until his hands begin to feel numb. But don't worry, Kovar. I'll remind you how it feels to be a slave. Jericho whispers into his ear as he gets on his knees and begins to punch Kovar across the face. Beg for your life, Jericho says as he grips the back of Kovar's head and lifts it to make sure he can look Jericho in the eyes. Please, Jericho, have mercy. You're right, Kovar says in a hollow breath. His spine was beginning to heal. He could feel the bones begin to reconnect. In a few moments, he would get sensation in his hands again. He would stab Jericho's eyes out, and in the confusion, he would snap his neck quickly this time. His plea for mercy should buy him enough time. This weak boy couldn't help but play the hero. I know that I'm right. Jericho suddenly slams his hand through Kovar's chest. His hand is so hot from the iron core right now that he's able to burn through flesh and grip Kovar's spine. His right hand grips it with force as he squeezes it. Kovar screams in pain, feeling Jericho stop his spine from healing. Now admit what you did to Lyra. Admit it or I kill you right now. Jericho yells of anger. If I admit it, you'll spare my life? You give me your word? Kovar asked Jericho. This man, this weak cripple, had Kovar's life in his hands. How was this possible? Kovar had no idea that this was the strongest Jericho had ever been. If Jericho had been born like this, then maybe his family would have truly accepted him. Maybe if Kovar wasn't abused as a slave, he wouldn't have become the monster he is today. The maybes didn't matter anymore. Jericho had 20 seconds left on the iron core. Yes, I give you my word. Now admit what you did. Jericho shakes Kovar's spine like a piñata. Kovar remains paralyzed and in agony from it. I manipulated her. I hired the frost giants to attack her. I wanted her brought here. I had heard tales of the winter night, Lyra, that she abandoned her position for her guild. I wanted her strength. It was all arranged. I made her into Vora, because Vora is the kind of love that I want. A loyal survivor. She's mine, Kovar says with desperation. Kovar was known as the strongest man around for centuries, but in this moment, he was crying. He was in pain. Finally, we get to see the real you, Jericho says bitterly. 10 seconds left. Jericho suddenly begins to punch Kovar's face again. He punches it repeatedly with the speed and might of a speeding train. Kovar yelled in pain as he felt his skull being crushed. Stop! You promised! You gave your word! Kovar yells in pure pain. Jericho keeps punching Kovar in the face. Soon, he feels Kovar's skull smash under his fists. He keeps it up. He wants to destroy Kovar's entire brain. Heat flares around his fists as the gray matter disintegrates under the heat of his punches. 5 seconds left. Jericho doesn't think about how much he hates Kovar. He doesn't think about how he might die in 5 seconds. At the near end of his life, Jericho thinks about the one person who gave him the courage to fight for his happiness. For a long time, he thought it was the memory of the dead that kept him going. But no, it was the feeling of meeting Lyra that made all the pain and suffering worth it. She deserves a life free of being controlled by others. Love alone isn't enough. I lied. Because you were right about one thing, Kovar. Jericho says as he takes a deep breath and crouches over Kovar's dead body. His brain was destroyed. Lyra is the kind of woman who deserves a man willing to do anything for her. I'll lie for her. I'll kill for her. Jericho looks away from Kovar, desperately searching for the eyes of Lyra, the woman he loves more than anything in this world. And I'll die for her. Time is out. Jericho stops breathing as his body gives out. He collapses onto the ground, his eyes open and still. Jericho Cogspire lays on the ground, dead beside Kovar. Moments pass as the slaves that are stuck inside their cages watch in shock. They all begin chanting, "Jericho! Jericho! Jericho! Jericho!" The slaves all chant in unison for Jericho. They feel a weight off their chest as they look at their conqueror dead on the ground, killed by a man who was born broken. Kovar's body begins to glow. The spirit of the pharaoh rises from Kovar's body. The spirit considers flying away, restarting the reincarnation process. But it looks at Jericho Cogspire. It sees his entire life. A life of pain and suffering. A life where he was forced to choose between giving up and moving forward. All the things he had accomplished. So much power in his mind, in his intellect. Yet the greatest power in him was a desire to see Lyra again. I want to tell her that she's free. I want to be able to look her in the eyes and tell her that her life belongs to her and only her. This man defeated Kovar in battle. He didn't use tricks like the vampires. He didn't use any special dagger. He killed him with his own hands. The spirit of strength entered Jericho's body, healing him completely. Jericho no longer needed the stone. His body was healed and more. He gasped awake as he realized that he was alive. The crowd continued to cheer. "Jericho! Jericho! Jericho!" The crowd continued to chant at Jericho as he stood victorious while glowing with power. This was the end of the Republic of Kovar and the beginning of the Republic of Jericho Cogspire.